Loose Change.
Oh, so the cereal is called Loose Change.
That'd be great. That'd be great cereal. And it comes in comes in a bag that just looks like a kid. And you have to like shake it upside down into your bowl.
And there's like a bunch of like pennies and nickels and stuff.
Yeah, it's like a paper clip.
Or 5 pence, I should say.
And almost every package gets thrown away with a bunch of fucking cereal in it still because it doesn't come out.
Right, yeah, it's like stuck in the back.
It doesn't all come out. Yeah. All right, this is already dumb.
Okay, it's a good start. Hey, welcome to Storied, a podcast where we take one piece of media and transform it into another.
This week we have kind of a special episode. It's our first listener-suggested topic. Muskrat Joe on iTunes. That's his name, right? But,
yeah.
Well, it sounds like a fun
Muskrat
guy.
Joe, yeah.
But Muskrat Joe suggested...
It's an actual muskrat.
I believe it is muskrat, which, you know, that's great. As long as something is listening. But he suggested that we do a Rick and Morty episode. So that's what our episode is about today. Sean, what are we making it into?
We're turning it into a live-action movie, a la, like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the early 90s. Super Mario Brothers, maybe.
Oh, man, the bar is super high on this one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Little known fact about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie was edited by Sally Menke, who also edited all of Quentin Tarantino's movie until her untimely death a few years ago. But yeah.
Wow.
So there you go. Ninja Turtles facts.
You know what? I'm gonna possibly put myself in danger here, but I still maintain that that's a pretty good movie, considering what the fuck it was. The first Ninja Turtles movie.
Wait, hang on. Okay, yeah, I thought you were going to say something else, and no, I would have to agree with you on that one.
It's actually like
solid.
It's solid. There's some really cool visuals in there. There's like some darkness that you don't expect. Like I really like even watching it again recently. Like when Raph like almost dies. It's fucking dark and like really feels like a low point in the story. You know?
Yeah. So who's going to be who's the main cast? Would be the first thing I want to know is who's being cast as Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
Man, if we were making this in the 90s... Christopher Lloyd.
Oh my god, you guys. The most obvious of all choices.
I know, but he is based on, have you ever seen... Rick and Morty was originally a short film about Marty and Doc, and it just became this somehow.
I saw like 30 seconds of it, and it's not... All the character depth and things that we love about Rick and Morty.
Yeah, it's a stupid internet joke. It's a stupid garbage, internet joke. But I guess they're like, this is like somehow like Dan Harmon was like, this has potential, and then just grabbed Justin Roiland and said, what if we change one letter in the main character's name?
I'm pretty sure all of the good character stuff comes from that side of the partnership. It feels like he's the one. Yeah, he's the one who's driving all of that. I feel like
it's so bizarre.
And Justin Roiland's just the guy who's just great at improvising a bunch of bullshit.
Dan Harmon's had an interesting and odd career. I was one of the few. I don't know how I do, but like how he got famous. Scud the Disposable Assassin. Have either of you guys read that?
Yep.
It's
I haven't.
It's good. You should read it. I have the entire full run of it. It's only 23 issues or something. But there's some really cool story stuff in there. It's like really bizarre and like unique. And he and Rob Schrab did it together. And that's how they got like in. But then he made Community, or he made what a weird
Monster jump.
House, and then they made Community. And Community, I never got into it, but it feels really off from his style. You know what I mean? Like he's really like something about craziness and kind of tonally and genre heavy crazy shit like really just ramps up his storytelling ability more so, I think. But it's really bizarre, like just tracing his career, how he got from like Scud to Monster House, which I still haven't seen. I really want to. And then
it's good. You should watch it.
Yeah, it looks good. Just one of those things I just never got around to watching. But yeah, so let's
Christopher Lloyd. Good.
This is kind of his masterpiece, so let's fuck it up.
Yeah, let's destroy it.
Are we? Oh, so are you going through all time here? I mean, like Christopher Lloyd and like, or do we just cast Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox?
Like right, as in like right now, like 2017.
No. I'm saying if we were making this in the early '90s, if we had a time machine,
what we're doing?
We went back to like. I don't know. We could do both. I mean, if we had to cast it today, it might be a little harder. But like you just cast the two of those
exact
guys.
characters, just with slightly different names.
yeah. They're just going on bizarre adventures.
I don't know
now,
that I would have
together.
cast Michael J. Fox just because Morty is. I mean, they're obviously both different, but Morty feels less like Marty than Rick feels like Doc to me.
I don't think Rick feels like Doc at all either. Like they're really different.
There's the superficial, like visual. Like they look similar.
If you were really going to cast it, you'd need like Sam Rockwell.
Oh man,
or something.
Oh, that'd be actually pretty good.
Playing Rick. I don't know. I mean, casting it is weird, right? Like Michael Cera as Morty.
Well, yeah. Actually, you know what? That's perfect.
In the 90s when he was like 6 or whatever.
Well, now we're talking about now. Look, I jumped forward to now.
Yeah, no, yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Keep up. 2017, bitch.
Perfect. So you're perfect to write this too.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know. This one scares me just because I like the show and respect the show so much that
like every other thing we've talked about, you hate. Every other episode we've done.
Well, they've been more sort of for want of a better word, generic. Like it's this show is so the voice of the two people that are involved.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like it's not a accessible show. It's like for you or it's not, and it's not like it's really like any other show. It's very much a product of those two minds.
Yeah, I mean, we should maybe break it down a little bit and talk about what we like in it and like what elements of it we'd want to keep and like what elements of it are really important to sort of like the spirit of that show and like the not thesis, but like what it's trying to say, I guess, about all the topics it covers, like PTSD and trauma and abuse and dealing with your problems and intelligence and the sort of all. I mean, it's totally like, your mileage may vary stuff, but I think that stuff is like sort of part and parcel with that show, and then a bunch of dumb fart jokes and shit. But there's a really specific core like heart to that show that maybe we should sort of unpack a little bit. I don't know if you guys have any specific thoughts about it.
Well, the other thing I would say too is that it's really smart and has better like science fiction ideas in it than a lot of things. Like it I wouldn't say that they don't hold up. They're not like legitimate science fiction, but they are clever in ways that are audacious. Like there's that whole episode where the things start getting screwed up multi-dimensionally, and like the screen splits 2 ways, and then 4 ways, and then 16 ways, and like everything that's going on in there is like legitimately happening differently, and it's like you're trying to pay attention to all of them at the same time, and it's just crazy and hard. But like that's something that most shows wouldn't attempt, let alone pull off, because it's really difficult to write something like that and make it good and put it together in such a way that somebody who's watching it feels like they know what's going on. So like that's the kind of stuff that I think is it makes the show stand out, and it's not afraid to tell like really dark stories sometimes. I heard recently that Justin Roiland was going through a divorce, and like the end credits thing for their company. I can't remember what the name of the company is right now, but the end credits thing used to have like him and his wife like cheering, and then like after that happened, like now it's literally just him sitting on the couch like drinking himself to death.
God.
Like, yeah, at the end of the show, like that kind of shit, it just makes it in there. And like then you get episodes like spoiler, but like when Rick goes to the jail at the end of season 2, it's really just kind of it's not afraid of anything. And I think that if Hollywood was going to make a movie out of it, they would be afraid of a lot of it, and it would get nerfed down into this bullshit pat sort of stuff that does sort of make it in there, the sentimentality that you're talking about, and the sort of good character stuff that works its way in would be what the story was. It would have a lot more heart and none of the darkness, and that would scare me.
Yeah, and it's because of the darkness that the heart shines so much, which is the thing I think would be mostly maintained. Like they're not like they don't veer away from those low points and those dark moments that most shows would. And even it's not even so dark or so present. It's just they let characters do things and be human in a way that most shows don't. That it really like resonates. Like even in the simpler, like the Pickle Rick episode was one that I just loved from the third season. Because the whole thing is just about how Rick doesn't want to be at the therapy. You know what I mean? But they do it in a way that it's right. But the whole premise is ridiculous and fun and crazy and science fiction. But it's all servicing that character story, which is just insane and so new and refreshing. And like that's why I think that show's so beloved.
Yeah, I think it feels like the show. A lot of it is, they sort of figure out what the core story for the episode is going to be, and then they just go bananas thinking about like all the crazy shit they could do. And then a lot, like if you look at that Pickle Rick episode, like a lot of like the dialogue is Rick talking about shit that's going on with Summer and what's her name? His daughter, Beth. Thank you. Talking about what's going on with Beth as he's just like fighting and like killing dudes and like rolling around as a pickle. It's like that gets written in after they've decided that he's going to kill a rat, a giant like spring-loaded trap, and use its bones to walk around. Like that's the kind of shit that I think is the genius of folding those two things together.
Yeah, like they avoid the talking heads problem, right? Where they're just having really interesting dialogue happen between characters, but there's also some just incredible visuals happening on screen at the exact same time. So it's like you don't have to worry about like just two people sitting in a room and talking, and it just being really, really boring. They sort of like layer that stuff over like interesting, compelling like things that also kind of tell you about Rick's character as well.
Well, they do push Morty in a lot of interesting ways in season 3, which I thought was what I liked a lot about the season. There was the one episode, the Vindicators 3, where he just wanted to be that superhero team, that like Avengers-ish superhero team, and actually do good.
Right.
And then like he had a place there, and then like the team liked him, and then Rick was like couldn't handle that. And it was fun how that played out. It wasn't just so openly expressed, even when Rick got into his drunk self. Like he like faked him out, and like he thought that he was talking about Morty, and even Rick thought that he was talking about Morty, but it was actually Noob, which was a great twist. But it's like in season 3, and I think in the last episode of season 3, which kind of escapes me now, like the details. But I just like Morty starts to act more independently of Rick and not really care so much about him, and he's like, "You're kind of an asshole." It's not.
Well,
Go ahead, sorry.
So one of the best things in the season so far, or like the show generally, is like when I think it was on the the one where they go to the planet of Ricks. What is the
Citadel of Ricks?
Everybody knows the name of this fucking episode but me, but
it's the Rick Lannis.
Basically, Rick Lannis, yeah, that one. He like shoots Rick and kills him because of he's threatening Summer, and like that's what Rick wanted him to do. But like the fact that he did it and stood up to Rick, is great, and then B, the fact that Rick knew he cared that much about Summer and used that against him, or used that for his own benefit, is also great. Because it shows so much about them as characters and like how much they understand each other. But it's just weird. But I just love that moment because it's like he loves his sister that much, to kill Rick over it, and it has a lot of pent up rage against Rick, for all the shit that he's done.
Yeah, it's the one I think the great thing that I love about that show is that Rick is even one step above in front of the audience, but not in a way that feels manipulating. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just they just service his character by keeping him that much at arm's length, even from the audience. Like you might get what he's doing, but it's after he's so smart. It's after he realizes you're going to get what he's doing, so he's already another step beyond that. If that makes sense. It's interesting how they
sort of.
Well, I mean,
I know what you mean, though. I get the gist.
You
of
always
it.
think you're catching on to how the story's going to progress and how Rick's going to react, and it's not in line with that, but he's already that much further developed. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and he's never. The thing about it is, it never feels cheap in a way that's like, oh, of course, there's always a like, aha, but I had a backup plan on my backup plan. That it's always like carefully constructed from the very beginning, and Rick will just be doing something, constructing something, or doing something in the background. And you're not sure what the fuck he's doing, and then like 20 minutes later, it actually is revealed what he was doing the entire time, and it's definitely set up early on where it doesn't feel cheap. It's not like a rug was pulled out from under the viewer. It's just, yeah, Rick is smarter than the audience, and I almost feel like that would be like he never breaks the fourth wall, but they rub up against it a whole lot. I mean, he
breaks the fourth wall.
I mean,
all the time.
so yeah, okay, I guess that's true. He does. He talks about seasons and stuff, but he never directly addresses the audience. Is what I'm trying to say. But he definitely, like, is he aware that he's in a television show really, or is it just a goof that is funny for that character because he's so smart? Like, would he be aware that in this movie we're making that he is in a movie? Would he be talking to the audience, or like trying to be, the fact that they're in a movie together be part of the plot?
It'd be interesting to fold some sort of like marketing bullshit into it, where like there's like if we made it now, there's like some sort of app that that is almost like a card trick or something, where people think that they use the app and then they go see the movie, and then it your number or whatever appears in the movie while you're watching it.
Oh yeah, that'd be interesting.
Do you know what I mean? Just bullshit like that. Like there might be something like that they could pull off to kind of continue that. But I say they, but I mean we, because we're
definitely making this
live action film starring a animatronic slug.
I think that 100% animatronics and makeup and practical effects, almost no CG if we can get away with it, to really hit that sort of that 90s feel.
So here's what you'd have to do then. If we were going to make a 90s version of this, it would inevitably be Rick and Morty have an adventure at the start of the movie, and then they go to New York for some reason.
Yeah, of course they have to, yeah.
It's the Masters of the Universe like version of Rick and Morty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're always hanging around New York, and like New York gave them a tax break, so they film a lot of things.
But that's funny because, like, I actually almost think it depends on how we want to handle this. Do we want to make the shitty version that's kind of agnostic of the show, and it is just like, let's make a live action Rick and Morty movie because it's a cash grab, right? Or is it like I do actually, the more I think about it, I'm seeing a version of it in which Rick initiates like this movie, you know what I mean? Like almost the cartoon version, like initiates this adventure, and kind of.
No, what happens is it starts as a cartoon, and they go through a portal, and they pop out on the other side, and they're real, right?
It's like SpongeBob, sponge out of water.
Yes, yeah, exactly right, yeah.
Which
that's definitely how this opens. It opens with them like in cartoon world, and they go through a portal, and they end up in the real world. Which is just a different dimension, but somehow they're in 3D, right? And they know, right? They would comment on how fucking weird they look in this world, and then the adventure would go from there, right?
Yeah, they're like claymation guys that are walking around in like Pee-wee's Big Adventure style,
my God.
Like in New York, among the real people. It's like Mario Odyssey, right? Like where
right. Mario's in the world, but somehow everyone else around him is a normally like proportioned human being.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man, this is exactly what they would do.
I can actually see
in the early 90s
being an episode. I can actually see this being a current episode of Rick and Morty, though. Like,
no. This is a movie. This is our movie. Don't do that.
Well, I know, but I mean, like working like alongside it versus necessarily being a warped departure, like a bad.
Well, do you know how? Like, okay, so do you know back in the 90s when they would do movie versions of a beloved like television franchise. It would just be a weird alternate movie universe where they would just do like a thing that had nothing to do with the main thing. Like it would be a side story that like never had any consequences on it. Never like touched the main story. My touchstone on this is Power Rangers, because I used to love the Power Rangers when I was like 10, and then they made a movie, and the movie had this whole like side story where they gained all these ninja powers, and it was crazy, and it was this new bad guy, and he came in just for the movie, and then he was sort of like, you know, defeated, and now they had these new powers or whatever, new outfits, but like that was effectively an alternate version of the television show. You know what I mean? Like they did all that stuff on the television show too, and it was a totally separate storyline. So it's almost like Rick and Morty style branched into a totally separate timeline just for the movie, and then like we never talk about that timeline ever again, and no one in the television show ever references those events from the movie. So I'm like, oh, remember that time we went to do that crazy adventure in the movie world? It's like totally displaced from the actual timeline of the television show.
But that's what they would say in the movie. They would in the movie.
Yeah, it's
say,
the exact words.
None of this is going to be on the show. Don't even think about it. You know, and then like Morty would be like, oh, geez, Rick. You know, and then they would end the movie that way, and then they would play another sort of like a Get Swifty over the credits.
Yeah, just
thing,
a like Justin Roiland made up bullshit movie. Song about something with a bunch of.
They would get like Will Smith involved.
Oh and, shit!
Like, they would be dancing together with the it'd be like Will Smith and like claymation Rick and Morty dancing on stage.
I love that with Vanilla Ice
and
like
appear in the movie. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like all that shit would happen for sure.
Okay, so I'm 100% on board with this just being a movie set in like it is a 90s movie. And we're making this in the 90s, right? Like
this is the thing. No, we're making it now, but it is still a 90s
so it's
movie.
Set, is it set in the 1990s?
No, well, maybe, but like you know, what I'm thinking of is like you could do this like Rick and Morty would. I think Chris is right. Like they would do it now, where like they just go, like, "Oh Jesus, what are we in a '90s movie?" You know what I mean? Like they would just say that.
That's like literally what I was just thinking. It's like they would see like a big slug monster, and it would look weird, you know, and then Rick would be like, "Damn it, Morty, just walk like 5 feet away from it. It can't move. It's just a '90s prop replica." You know what I mean? Like it's just a shitty. It's like 5 guys in a suit. What are you doing? Just, you know what I mean? Like
it would go over like take the suit off of them, and there's just like a bunch of like riggers and stuff underneath it.
Yeah, but then those guys are also made up of aliens. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It would just keep going down that rabbit hole.
Like really poorly green screen special effects and stuff.
Or it'd be like almost like Galaxy Quest-ish. It'd be like aliens that saw a 90s movie and thought that, you know, like they saw like a Little Shop of Horrors or even like a later 80s movie of a similar aesthetic that just like they used that against us as like a fear tactic, but they were like a weaker race, you know? So they had started to develop like that kind of aesthetic. Does that make sense? Like I could see that happening where like similarly to like I think they have several episodes in which aliens pull Rick and or Morty into like a dreamy sort of.
They put them in like the Matrix. Like there's the Matrix within the Matrix episode from like the first or second season. I don't remember which season. Probably second.
Yeah,
season.
There's the one with David Cross.
Right.
With Jerry gets sucked in there too, and he's got the Apples campaign.
God, that episode is incredible. Where his Matrix is only operating at like 2% power, and Jerry's too stupid to realize it's like he's like seeing the same 3 characters over and over again.
It's so good.
So is the premise that like in Rick and Morty, in universe Rick and Morty are like they go through a portal and they end up in like the 90s world, or like they abducted by aliens and then placed in a 90s movie for the enjoyment of the aliens, or like what is the like setup?
Well, there's a couple ways you go with it, right? You could go like to like Rick has to go to that sort of era or something, you know, like he decides that the only place to get what they need is back then, because that's the only time that they made
that fucking Szechuan sauce.
Yeah. Well, they had like, you know, there's like the plastic they used in movie props that causes cancer, and they don't have it anymore. Or do you know what I mean? It's just some kind of bullshit like that where they have to go back. Or you could do it where they get drawn back there through time travel means, or it's just an alternate dimension that they escape into for a while, and they get trapped there. You know, like there's a couple of ways you could play that, I think. It'd be like that episode of the Treehouse of Horror, the Simpsons one, where Homer is like 3-dimensional for a
Oh,
while.
yeah.
He walks out into the real
Do you remember
world.
that?
Yeah, that was really.
Yeah.
It was like that stuck with me as a kid as just being like almost creepily bizarre because he doesn't get back too, which was really.
Yeah, he just
good.
walks away, and that's the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah, he just like sitting on a bench in the real world, just like sad and weird, and people are like reacting to him.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
I like the idea that they intentionally go to this place, but then they've done the lost portal gun gimmick a couple of times in the show where like it breaks or someone takes it or it runs out of power and they're kind of stuck.
Oh, you
there.
know what happens is they go there and then it just turns into a movie prop and stops working.
Oh, that's super good. Oh, perfect.
So now Rick has to use it or he has to make a new portal gun. That's like the whole movie is
So it's okay.
him trying to find
He's
parts
like-
on
it's like-
real Earth.
and it's like he can make a joke. It's like, where did I get this at fucking Spencer Gifts?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, so this is just.
Yeah, there's literally a whole section of the movie where they're making 90s jokes.
Oh, I mean that's the whole movie.
Like they're just walking past like Spencer's and Hot Topic and like merry-go-round and all those fucking stores.
So this is just Star Trek 4, right? Where they just like go back in time, and there's a bunch of goofs about them using like Macintosh computers and like not understanding that nothing was voice activated, and everything looks cheap and shitty, and then no one has the parts they need because they haven't been invented yet, kind of thing. Like it sounds like what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a Star Trek reference in there probably. They're whales, but those whales are actually aliens.
Yes, absolutely.
I can totally see Morty thriving in this environment.
Go on.
Because it's a much simpler time to navigate socially. Like, there's not. You know what I mean? Like he's not.
Does he enroll in 90s like high school?
No, but I think it's actually could be really fun to play with. Is like a lot of Rick and Morty episodes, not all of them, but a lot of them, like the Anatomy Park, are riffs on pre-existing, sci-fi properties. And I think that this could be, unless they've already done it, which I don't think they have, the Back to the Future kind
Oh
of
fuck, you're right.
episode.
God
You know
damn
what I
it.
mean?
Yep.
It could kind of mimic and mirror that sort of thing. And you could.
Oh my god! So
You could see Beth and Jerry in their younger
but they're
versions.
real
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're real, and like it's like Sarah Chalk and Chris Parnell.
Oh my god.
Are actually playing them.
I was even thinking, which would be even more bizarre and a fucking pain in the ass to make, is that no matter who the physical cast member is portraying Rick and Morty, Beth and Jerry and Summer, you'd still like get their voices. Like it's still Justin Roiland and Justin Roiland and Chris Parnell and Sarah Chalk's voices coming
for
out.
sure.
Yeah. So like every single
sure.
line is 80 yard. You know.
Oh man. God.
Yeah.
I love the idea that it's a Back to the Future movie, but it just goes to the 90s from like 2017, and like it's not that big a jump, but it's big enough, like technology wise, to be an inconvenience to Rick.
Yeah.
And like it's within his own, like he would also still be alive at this period, the same way that you find young Doc Brown in the 50s in Back to the Future. So you could definitely have some fucking weird shit where he meets himself, and maybe he's not. Like he's real and he's not like claymation or something, and but instead of like Doc Brown being completely surprised and not believing Marty when he shows up, like 1990 whatever 3's Doc or Rick would be like, oh shit, it finally happened, huh? All right, well come in the back, and like he's got all this shit ready to like help him out.
Yeah, well, it would be cool if if like he showed up there and Rick just couldn't help him because he'd already tried to help him several hundred times.
Oh man, he just had like a
because this
ton of
already
Ricks
happened.
come by. He's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really good.
It's just like, you guys gotta stop knocking on my door, and it's just like he just slams it in his face, and then like this Rick has to kill that Rick or something, to get what he needs, or he has to hold him hostage or use him, or they have to go kidnap the real Morty and bring him. Like real Morty wouldn't exist, but you know what I mean. Like there's definitely some weird shit you could do.
I
there.
love the idea that like past Rick is just like, nah, fuck you guys, like not helpful at all. Like I think that's fucking awesome. It's totally opposite of what they would do in Back to the Future, where like they go back in time and past Rick is like, nah, fuck you. Like I only had 99 of these fucking things and that's it. We're out. Get the fuck off my porch. Like that's fucking good.
I don't think they've ever really given Rick's backstory, and I might be extrapolating off of the first episode of season 3 with the Szechuan sauce, and there's like that.
That's completely fabricated.
There's fake out traumatic moments of like I think Rick's wife dies, Beth Mom, but you could. There is potential in this too to like tell a actually heartfelt Rick centric story, and if the Rick of this time is not helping the Rick and Morty, our protagonists in the story, like you could have almost the opposite of Back to the Future, or instead of where it's like Marty trying to get his parents back together, Rick's like trying to convince, or he's just like mad at his present day self or his past self, and he's like almost talking his wife out of like, not talking his wife out of, but he's like just shits on him. You know what I mean? Like he just fucks up his own future and oddly present because of the way that he like disapproves of his past self. You know,
I can see him getting obsessed with it in a way that like he wants to help him, or like not help him, but like correct the mistakes that he made. In a way that he's mad about, like it's like Rick is there going like this guy's an asshole, and then they like he's like trying to sabotage past Rick in some way, and like Morty has to like intervene. You know what I mean? Like that feels like it.
No, I was going to say that actually really tracks with the tone and the spirit of the show, which is like just Rick being completely unable to admit when he's wrong and like know that he's fucking things up. A lot of times his pride gets him into really shitty situations that everyone else has to bail him out of because he just won't admit that he's fucked up.
Like usually he just brushes it off, right? But like this time he just can't let it go, and like he gets obsessed with it or something. Like I was
going to pitch like he is kind of a dick to past Rick. And I mean, they're both kind of dicks to each other, and there's basically like no matter like there's that old adage, and Back to the Future does this too, where it's like you can't use time travel to fix shit. Like if you try and fuck with the past to make your current life better, it just makes things worse. So maybe like Rick already knows that, and he's not going to bother because he just knows everything. But in trying to keep things exactly the way they are, he actually just keeps accidentally fucking like present Rick's life up over and over again. To the point where he just becomes really like that's part of why he's super shitty. But past Rick knows that that's going to happen, or maybe I guess future Rick would know that that's what's going to happen, or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Like he tries to not fuck up the timeline, but by doing that, he just fucks over past Rick a lot. But he knows it's going to happen, so he's sort of a slave to it, right?
But there's something great about the idea that Rick is responsible for his own downfall.
Right. Yeah.
Or like his own shit, but like that's also like on a literal level and a metaphorical one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he steals something important from past Rick, knowing that he's going to do that because he is also from that period. He just remembers that having happened to him back in the day.
You could back when he was real.
Yeah, back when he was a real actor.
You could really kind of set this predicament up and kind of foreshadow too. There's something about like upsetting and kind of nullifying the stakes of this towards the end of the movie when you realize that this is exactly how it played out in the past as well. You know what I mean? Like in the Rick and Morty timeline, like nothing changed. This just happened before. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe like present day Rick or the Rick of the 90s, like this is when he started drinking heavily or something. So this is why, he didn't remember these encounters, and you kind of get to that.
Oh man, he just like self-medicates and forgets all this shit. That totally tracks too.
But it doesn't happen until the end. So it doesn't track with the story, so you still think there's stakes, and then conversely, you could really like if you towards the beginning of the movie, like Morty could pull out like a picture of him and his family, and he's like, "Oh no, Rick, I'm kind of disappearing in this picture," and Rick could be like, "That's fucking stupid, Morty. It doesn't make any sense. The picture.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
That's not how it works. That's how time travel works. You fucking idiot, And then like he kind of. He's like, this already happened. The picture, you wouldn't be here if this didn't happen. So, we just got to make sure that it happens as usual. Like he could kind of set the stage for it.
He could gloss over it.
Yeah, he could kind of gloss over it and like make fun of Morty for believing in such a ridiculous thing. But not upset the stakes so much that doesn't pay off later. You know what I mean? Like, because I think they're.
Well,
I think,
the
go ahead, sorry.
no, the ideal version of the ending of this movie is that you realize that that the story of past Rick is the story of past Rick, that Rick screwed over past Rick, and thus screwing himself over. That that Morty probably, like what you're saying right now, like he realizes that Rick lied to him, but then gives him a pass because he fixed it at the expense of his own future.
Yeah, that again tracks with Rick being like he is a shit, but he's willing to like sacrifice himself and his own happiness because he likes being so miserable to make the right choice in the clinch.
It doesn't quite, and they also don't quite give you the year in the show, unless I'm misremembering. Like, what year does Rick and Morty take place? In which year does the Rick and Morty take place? The cartoon. So there is this could be around the time that Jerry and Beth got together, and they talk about it like almost every episode. The reason they got together is because Jerry just knocked up Beth with Summer. You know what I mean? So
yeah, he tries to stop that happening.
Yeah,
that event, and that event could be like that. Maybe that's why. Maybe Rick wasn't upfront with Morty about it. When they went back in time, but you realize that's why he did go back in time. Potentially, you know what I mean? And then like Morty realizes that and like hates Rick because that means that he would have never been born. But at the same time, there's something. There's something.
And then he also enlisted Morty to help him like stop himself from being born.
I think what's interesting is that like the idea that Rick. You could even just have him admit it up front, and I think that's actually more on his personality. Just be like, here's exactly what's up. What I was going to say is he admits up front that he doesn't remember anything because this is the period in his life he started drinking really heavily. So when Morty's like, "Oh, geez, aren't you from this time period? Why don't you know what's going to happen?" Rick can just be like, "Morty, I was drinking heavily during this period of my life. I don't remember anything from like the 90s at all." And you can just have him say that up front so that just like lampshade why he doesn't just have prescient knowledge of what's going to happen. Also, I think it's interesting if Rick is like, if Morty tries to like adhere to the Back to the Future rules, because that's how he understands time travel to work, where he's like trying to be really careful and not interact with anybody or not like interact with his parents or whatever. And Rick is just like, don't be fucking stupid, Morty. Like, whatever happened has already happened, so why even be careful? Just do normal, just be a normal person, live your normal life, just knock into whatever you want to knock into, because it's already happened, so who gives a shit? Like, that's not how time works,
Yeah.
There is something interesting about him trying to, like, prevent Beth and Jerry from getting together, although I have a feeling that if he really, really wanted to go back and stop that, there's nothing that could stop that from happening.
Well, I don't think that's the main narrative. Like he doesn't do that initially. Like it's just he thinks about it. It's like an opportunity that arises while he's there, and like it becomes a thing. Like he starts getting more and more like he sees them together and it drives him crazy, and Jerry's just doing stupid shit everywhere, and he's getting like really angry about it, and then like young Rick probably introduces Rick as like his grandfather or something, and it's like it gets really, and then Morty gets to know his own parents, and it's weird, and he's like weirdly attracted to his mom or something.
It's the exact
like,
opposite.
It's like the opposite of Back to the Future. And she's not
exactly.
even remotely
and
interested in him.
Yeah. And it just gets really bizarre, for a while there, like where they're hanging out at the high school all the time for some reason. Like that's why Morty's in the high school. He's in the high school with his mom and his dad.
Yeah. So the way that we're talking about this, it could be really interesting that at first, maybe when Beth and Jerry get together, they don't tell Rick the truth about it. Like he just thinks they're in love or whatever, and then like present Rick is like also on scene, and he's like talking to younger Rick and being like, doesn't this piss you off? Like, how the fuck can you sit here and stand and like watch this? Like, don't you know what he did to your daughter? And like, he's the one who sort of like puts all these ideas in young Rick's head, where before Rick just didn't know or was okay with it or something. You know what I mean? Like Rick, like past Rick was actually pretty content with Beth and Jerry being together, and then young or older Rick comes in and like puts all these like fucked up ideas in young Rick's head, and that's where the idea actually, even like the seed of the idea comes from originally. You know what I mean? Where he fucks his own happiness up.
Before we get too much further into this, I'm looking up
how does time travel work?
No, because I know that Rick was gone for like a certain amount of time before. Like he's gone for like a while. Like before
he's gone out of her life, out of Beth's life, and that's why she's like super scared that he's going to leave again. So I guess that like at some point he became just like a deadbeat dad and just bailed out on the family. But we don't really know why. Like he talks about the fake backstory that like where his wife died, Rick's wife, but we don't actually know why he bailed out.
Maybe we don't get all of that, but maybe this is the opportunity to show that like how he left, you know, whether he got like stuck in another dimension or something, and then kind of in that you know repeating circle kind of timeline that we had talked about, that we find out at the end that the events of the movie were sort of predestined and predetermined. His actual motive for going back, even if he says it was like there's this plastic that they used in movie sets that you know,
I love that's part of it. I love that.
But then you realize he came back because he is trying to either stop himself from being lost for that time or re-enter Beth's life at this time, even if it is his future self, if that makes sense. Like you never admit that out loud, but you kind of, through the events of the film, come to realize that was the point of the mission.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You could do that. Or what you could do is have Rick realize during the movie that he caused past Rick to go away from, to leave. And then the back half of the movie is him going to the future and convincing himself to go back somehow. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like that now is the time.
I mean, that makes sense. I like the idea that, like, you know, he would want to break them up, but he'd never admit it, but he does love Morty, right? And he loves his family to a certain extent. So like it's as much as he fucking hates what they went through, and he'll hold it against Jerry forever. He wouldn't give up the opportunity to have Morty as his grandson. Like he might realize that partway through, like, you know, and the idea that he goes to the 90s either is trapped there or goes there on purpose, realizes, holy shit, do you know what this means? I can like solve all these problems. And then realizes that near the end that like, it's not worth it. Like all the shitty like mistakes that I've made are worth the good things. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's too heartwarming.
But you know, I think you would genuinely wonder. The stakes to me are like it's interesting if Morty and Summer are sort of the stakes of the movie, and like whether or not Rick is going to actually go through with what he's talking about doing, knowing, you know, what could happen, what that would mean. Even and it could come up too, like, you know, Rick could say like, don't worry about it. There's all these dimensions and you're in all of them. And, you know, like there's going to be a million Mortys. Okay. Don't worry about it. There's just this one. And like, that doesn't matter because it's not him.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so like, I feel like you can get into this thing where, you know, Morty going away and wondering whether Rick's going to go through with what he's going to do, and then like you see Morty splinter off and like try and find a way to stop Rick, and he goes to past Rick and he tries to get past Rick to help him stop Rick from stopping himself from being created, and then you know you realize that Rick actually didn't go through with it or whatever. Like later in the movie,
okay, if Morty goes to like past Rick and like fills him in on what's up, that could easily be the precipitating event that like fucking knocks his life off a cliff and makes it shitty. When he's like, okay, let me level with you about what's going on, and he tells him like Beth and Jerry are getting married. He knocked her up. et cetera, et cetera. I'm gonna like not be around if you don't help me. And he goes out of his way to like sabotage present or whatever future Rick's plans. But in doing so, it sort of like sets past Rick's like life on a course that makes it like ends up being all fucked up and like, you know, turning him into an alcoholic and shit. That could be really interesting too. Like, was it worth it? You know,
It could be.
It's butterfly effect. We're just making butterfly effect. It's fine.
There could be an interesting. This feels like a really good premise in which you really, and it feels like it being movie worthy, but it actually pits Rick and Morty against each other. Like potentially, like if like the way in Back to the Future that Doc didn't go back in time with Marty, so like maybe at the end of the first act, like Rick, as we know him in the cartoon and show, goes back to his normal timeline, but Morty gets abandoned in the 90s, and then he befriends and becomes close to a much more sympathetic Rick of that
like,
time
I like this
period.
Rick better.
Yeah, and like he also doesn't. He's able to bond with him because he doesn't have the pressure of being his grandson. Do you know what I mean? And then like he discovers Rick's plot to potentially stop Jerry and Beth from getting together or something, like future Rick, the Rick as we know and love. And then he tries to stop present Rick from leaving Beth's life. Or I don't know exactly how it would shake out, but where there's a Rick of the past that Morty bonds with that actually makes him closer to future Rick because he's able to access feelings and parts of future Rick that are the same person but of a different time. Do you know what I mean? Even though they're in conflict with each other, and then future Rick is maybe he's not exactly he's got a plan that he's thought out as super smart Rick that is still going to preserve Rick or Morty and Summer's existence, but maybe not like just fare better for Beth and or Jerry. If that makes sense, like it's not just complete revenge or disruption or anything like that, and it is because of Rick and Morty's conflict that things played out the way they do anyway. Does that make sense? Like Morty's role in the story allowed for his own birth and existence as he knows it, if that makes sense.
I mean, it definitely feels like a Back to the Future movie, which is great.
He finally stands up to Rick in an interesting way, but like the thing you would have to do then, though, is make sure that Rick orchestrated all of that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end of the movie, you know, like you would reveal that like Morty felt like he finally got one over on Rick, and then we reveal that wasn't the case. I think that somebody comes in from off screen and like Rick pays them off, and that person was a key player that Morty convinced to do something or something like that, you know?
You'd have to have just the last scene of the movie just be Rick standing over the camera as Morty's like writhing on the ground. He's like, "This is just a movie, Morty. None of this is going to have any impact on the season at all, Morty." Just shit like that. I was going to mention that there is always sort of I kind of touched on this earlier, but there's always a sort of like a tone or note of like self-sacrifice, and it's like sacrificing one's own happiness for the greater good of the group. That sort of happens now and again on that show, where, like, you know, to Chris, your earlier sort of story pitch, like, you know, if Rick, if it's actually young Rick's plot to break them up, and young Rick doesn't know that Morty is his grandkid. He just thinks he's like a kid from around the block, like Marty and Doc's relationship. And they sort of bond, and then he realizes that young Rick is going to try and break them up, and he has to basically destroy this relationship with this like a much better, nicer version of his grandfather for like, I really want to keep this, but I can't because I won't exist and Beth won't exist and our family as it exists and all of the other people and the life that we have together will be irrevocably changed, and that's selfish. But so I have to be miserable with a fucking shitty version of my grandfather or have nothing. It seems like really on note for the kind of style of the show.
Yeah, it's like Morty being the one responsible for Rick's absence.
Yeah.
For all that time.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
So how that happens is like Rick gets invited to go out drinking and he wasn't going to go, but Morty convinces him
Go for
to
it.
go.
Yeah, you'll have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. He's just like, here, I'll pour you a couple drinks. And like, you know, he's starting, like, Morty's getting drunk with him, you know?
Yeah.
He's like, ha ha, I love this, ha ha. And he's just drinking it, and it's terrible, and he hates it. But he's trying to get Rick drunk so that he becomes a drunk.
God, having to, like, intentionally ruin young Rick's life to, like, make sure that the timeline doesn't get fucked up is really fucking dark. But in the way that we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, like, the show is dark, and it has a specific use for that darkness, and I think that's fucking rad.
But there's also something really kind of tragically Rick and Morty tragically beautiful of, like, Morty bonding with young Rick and having to ruin him.
Yep.
That then allows him to just better understand the old antagonistic Rick better. You know what I mean? And, like, in a while they'll never completely. It feels like their relationship will still, in the way that a standalone movie, as you were talking about at the beginning of this, it will still feel the same. It'll just have a different kind of nuance to it. If that makes sense, like, it's just kind of this unspoken nuance. Like, it doesn't change the dynamic of the relationship. It just gives it more depth, you know, and kind of like just fleshes it out more. Because they still have the same relationship. They've just you just have been through this experience with them to realize that it was inevitable, and this is just how it was always meant to be. You know, it's almost kind of tragic, but at the same time, kind of touches on the emotion the way that Rick and Morty do, like a good Rick and Morty episode will.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great.
It's also, like, it does go back to that theme of, like, they can't get away from each other. Like, they're really unhealthy, sort of somewhat codependent relationship that they share with each other. Like, they don't have the strength to escape it, so like they don't, like, they're scared of not having that and being healthy and, like, having a normal relationship, so they would just keep falling back into shitty old unhealthy habits. And this is just an extension of that, which I think is really cool. So I mean, we talked about the Rick and Morty that go through the portal to 90s real reality world. Are they actually claymation, or is everyone real in this version? Are they actually? Is like young Rick and Morty also played by actual actors?
I think young Rick and Morty are, but like current Rick and Morty are not. But nobody says anything
they just look
about it.
To the people in the movie, they look completely normal.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to nail that one
that
important piece down.
If it's the 90s, I think there's only one Morty, because Beth and Joe wouldn't have had him yet.
Yeah, you're right.
Right, yeah. No, the Morty doesn't exist in the 90s.
Sorry, go on the internet, complain about the inconsistencies in this time travel movie.
Oh, I will.
Yeah. Well, I think it seemed like we're you know, like Rick early in the movie should just say, like, you can't mess with time, you know, because he doesn't really do it, right? It's like multiple dimensions are not time. And so, like, messing with time doesn't work. Should be something he says earlier, and then you find out that it didn't. He wasn't just saying that, you know. Like, all of this already happened, and it would continue. It's a loop, you know. It always happens. It's like anytime you have a time travel story, everything has to happen in that time travel story. Nothing can alter what happened, you know. So basically, you just see the story unfold as it did, and will always. No matter how many times it goes back. And somehow we maybe convey that to people towards the end of the movie again, or reiterate it, or maybe just on second watching you just kind of see that. But I think that would be a good thing to get in there. You know, Rick already knows how this is all going to go. Yeah. Even though he knows he's already failed before he starts, but he still tries.
Or he just got so drunk he didn't remember.
Exactly. But yeah, I think but yeah, he didn't remember that he failed. It was, yeah.
Or it's just, and maybe that's, if we do get him out of the story, the Rick and Morty version of Rick, the present day timeline, we get him out of the story, maybe it's because he just knows that he can't change it, and then, like, Morty decides to say anyway, and just Especially if there's a chance meeting with past Rick. Like he was literally, maybe his goal was true at the beginning. Like he was going to go get the plastic that gives people cancer that they use in movie props, and then he gets out of there because he knows this is inevitable. Like it's almost like he's lived this before, but the whole experience is just new to Morty. And then Morty kind of just takes it upon himself to stay, like potentially. But I think you run the risk of having it feel like a twist at the end, when I don't think it should. It'd feel like a reveal that kind of just sheds new emotional light on everything,
Yeah.
In a way that Rick and Morty often does. It's like the episode, I think it's season 2, final episode when Rick turns himself in, right? It doesn't feel like a twist. It feels like it was earned.
Yeah, like he's always been... his personality has never like changed, right? Like he admits more about himself. Like in season 3, he fully just goes, "Yep, I'm a shitty father. I'm sorry, I'm a bad father." Like the episode with Beth, like when he's like, "You were a scary ass kid," and he's like, "Yeah, I was crazy, and I'm a shitty dude."
Yeah.
Like I don't remember him actually fully admitting that before. He might have, but like he admits more about his personality, but. And he comes to terms with it more, but his personality hasn't changed. But what I like about the basic, first off, I love that we didn't just come into this episode being like, it's just Back to the Future, right? Like we got there sort of like by a meandering route that we didn't plan, which is really funny. But I like that in Back to the Future, like Marty does make his present better. Like he fixes his family, and he gets away with fixing things by altering the past. Whereas in this, to stick to the tone of the show, everything's futile. Like you can't make your life better. It's just gonna be shit. You have to just come to terms with how shitty it's gonna be and get used to it and get comfortable with it. That all like makes perfect sense to me in the sort of language of the show.
Yeah,
I think it's really solid, and I think that the nice thing, weirdly, the nicest thing is that it comes full circle back to the original Back to the Future short.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
I was thinking that when I suggested it and didn't say it out loud, but it was like, and then hearing Harrison repeat it, it's like that feels very movie worthy too. Right. Like that's like this is the one that started it all, so why not use this opportunity for the movie?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a big story to tell, like, because they're always hinting at it and like teasing it out, like with the what their past was, and I don't think you get everything out of the movie either, but you do get enough that you sort of like understand Rick a little bit better, but still, it's more about Morty. I feel like the movie we ended up on, like, and that's nice. Like, it's you get enough Rick without ruining him, which is cool.
And there's something really nice about it. Doesn't change the relationship, but yet it does. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. Like if you find out that if Morty was kind of responsible for Rick disappearing for that time, when they kind of get back together at the end of the movie, right? Morty can feel more sympathetic towards Rick, but then say something like, he's like, "Rick, I just want to say I'm sorry for everything that happened." And then like Rick can still, but it doesn't change the fact that Rick is still an asshole in the present day. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he's still the same person that Morty couldn't easily coexist with, and who was an antagonist of Morty's. So it doesn't change the relationship. It changes the context of it for the audience and Morty, but it's still, you still get to maintain Rick and Morty as they were at the beginning of the movie, you know?
Well, this is a great movie.
Yeah. Live action, Rick and Morty coming at you. Coming at you, yeah!
When does it release?
2019.
Wow, okay. It's a pretty aggressive schedule.
Well, we already have it written.
That's true, yeah. We've already broke the story. Now he's got to write that script.
Nah, it's gonna release in 2034 because it's gonna take that long for Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland to get on board and write it
and voice everything.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
Michael Cera will be in his 40s.
Yeah, all the characters we want to cast totally
Michael
age
Cera's
out.
not going to be in this version, the one we landed on, because that's only real Morty, and real Morty isn't going to be in this movie.
Yeah, he's claymation.
We got one of those kids from Stranger Things. They're hot now.
Don't say they're
Will
hot.
they be hot in 2034? Yeah, those kids are hot, man.
Don't say that. Oh God. Oh God. What have we done?
It's too late.
Well,
thanks for listening to this episode.
Yeah. Next week we're gonna do.
Well, one of these days,
something.
You think episode 10 we would have figured out a really good outro for this show, but we're still a bunch of fucking amateurs.
You know what I say? I say we just end it like just really awkwardly with no information.
Okay, goodbye.
See you later.
Storied is Chris Rebbert, Harrison Pink, and Sean Ainsworth, and our music is composed by the amazing Jared Emerson Johnson.
If you'd like to find out more about us, please follow us at storiedcast on Twitter. And if you have any feedback for the show or any ideas for future episodes, please email us at storiedcast@gmail.com. Have a good day!